What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Hartford, Connecticut. And today we're going to look back at the Joe Thornton trade, which occurred back on November 30th, 2005. Now, this trade was between the San Jose Sharks and the Boston Bruins and saw the Sharks acquire former first overall pick center Joe Thornton from Boston in exchange for a trio of players in center Wayne Premier's, defenseman Brad Stewart, and left wing Marco Strom. So, why did this trade happen? Basically, Joe Thornton had received heavy criticism from the media and fans alike after his poor play in the 2003-2004 playoffs. And basically, there was a lockout in 2004-2005, and he's a restricted free agent. So Thornton had made it known he was upset with the current state of the Boston Bruins at that point in time, but he did sign a 3-year deal as a restricted free agent, as the NHL kind of has a handshake agreement that nobody else really targets restricted free agents. Now, it was clear, though, that after Thornton signed his 3-year contract, neither side was happy, and they were both looking for an excuse to move on from one another. So, the Bruins were struggling in the 2005-2006 season, but Thornton was doing very well individually, arguably having the best start to his season in his career at this point. So the Bruins decided, you know what, let's try to sell high on him. Did it work out? Let's look at the Sharks and Joe Thornton. So, first things first, the Sharks got center Joe Thornton. And Thornton would finish the 2005-2006 season on a tear, recording 92 points, 20 goals to 72 assists for the Sharks over 58 games, which was easy enough for him to win the Art Ross Trophy that year. Now, however, his play would fall off in the playoffs once more, and the Sharks were eliminated unceremoniously in the second round that year. He did end up winning the league MVP award. Now, he had a slow start to the 2006-2007 season, but he did eventually get better and ended the season with 114 points, 22 goals, 92 assists. Now, he would finish second in the league in points to Sidney Crosby. So, pretty impressive. Now, he played a little better in the playoffs that year, but he still struggled, and the Sharks went home early once more. Now, he did slightly regress in the 2007-2008 season, but he finished fifth in the league in scoring. Now, he had a solid 2008-2009 season, and a strong 2009-2010 season. And this 2009-2010 season saw the Sharks end up actually having the 1 seed in the West. However, the team would fall in the Western Conference Finals. He had a solid showing in the playoffs, his best to date at that point in time. Now, he gets named captain before the 2010-2011 season, and as a response, he ends up continuing to record assists, and his defense continues to improve and play well. So he's a good guy when it comes to getting assists and playing solid defense. So he would regress in the lockout-shortened 2012-2013 season, and he did end up improving individually in the 2013-14 season. However, this season's known as the year where the Sharks blew a 3-0 series lead against the Kings in the playoffs. So obviously this led to a lot of changes, and one of them was he ends up losing his captaincy. So he slows down in the 2014-2015 season, but he does have a nice bounce back the following year in 15-16. Now, the team would make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, but they would lose to Pittsburgh in 6 games that year. That was the best performance in the playoffs for Joe Thornton, however. So he is looking a little better. Now, he did slow down in the 2016-2017 season, and he failed to record 10 or more goals for the first time that year since his rookie year, excluding the lockout-shortened 2012-2013 season. So at this point, it becomes clear he's not necessarily the goal scorer he once was. So he would injure his ACL and his MCL in January of 2018, which ended that year early for him. Now, he did improve on his goal totals, but he did lack in assists. Now, he had a decent 2018-2019 season, and this saw the Sharks make a run to the Western Conference Finals. However, they would lose. Now, he had a rough 2019-2020 season, and he would walk after that season concluded. So how are his individual stats? Well, he's a 4-time All-Star for the Sharks. He won the Art Ross Trophy 1 time, which is, of course, the league lead in points. He also won the Hart Memorial Trophy 1 time, which is, of course, the league MVP. And then he also has a couple Sharks franchise records. He has the most points in a single season for the Sharks with 114. That was the 06-07 campaign. He has the most assists in Sharks history with 804. And up to this point, he has the best plus-minus for Sharks history with a plus 161. That's impressive right there. So, obviously, Boston gave up a lot, it seems. Of course, it really Thornton wasn't doing it in Boston, so it made sense to do this trade. What did Boston end up getting in return? So we're going to discuss center Wayne Premier's first. And he played decently over parts of 2 years for the team before being traded. Now, he's traded alongside Brad Stewart, so let's get Brad Stewart out of the way. He was a decent offensive-minded defenseman for parts of 2 years as well before being traded. Now, this trade that happens is more because Stewart failed to come to a contract with Boston. He was kind of like, yeah, I'm not necessarily feeling it. So Boston decided, you know what? Peter Chiarelli decided, you know what? Let's just trade him, and we'll bundle Premier with him. They traded the two of them to the Calgary Flames in exchange for defenseman Andrew Fernance and right wing Chuck Kobasu. So Fernance himself, he had a quiet year one. Now he ends up having solid 3 years after that. His next 3 years were solid as a defenseman, but he didn't do too much when it came to offense. That was fine. They didn't need him to. Now he has a solid 2010-2011 season, and he's known for this when in the playoffs that year against Montreal, he would score a goal and he flipped the bird to the crowd. Now he gets fined for this, and he eventually said, oh no, I didn't mean to do it, and then he said, no, I did mean to do it. It was an emotional moment for me. I apologize. Obviously, took some hate for that, but they did end up winning the Stanley Cup that year, so he did get a ring. Now he recorded a career-high 6 goals the following year in the 2011-2012 season, and he has a solid 2012-2013 season before he walks, joining his hometown Edmonton Oilers. Now the other player, right wing Chuck Kobasu, he ends up having a quiet first half season for the team. Now he ends up having 2 solid seasons after that, as he proved to be a serviceable second/third line player. Now he ends up struggling in his 4th year, and he ends up getting traded. So he's traded to the Minnesota Wild in exchange for right wing Craig Weller, right wing Alexander Falstrom, and a 2011 second round pick. We'll get to that pick in a moment. So how did these guys do for Boston? So right wing Craig Weller, he spent half a year in the AHL before he himself was traded. Now he's bundled with another player and another pick going to the Florida Panthers in exchange for a pair of defensemen in Dennis Seidenberg and Matt Bartkowski. So Seidenberg had a decent impact over his first half season for Boston, and he has a career-best 7 goals in the 2010-2011 campaign, where they ended up winning the Stanley Cup that year, and he had a key role in those playoffs for Boston. Now he has a solid 2011-2012 season, and unfortunately for him, a strong 2012-13 season ends up getting cut short after he tears his ACL and MCL in a December game. Now he has an iffy 2013-14 season, of course, coming back from a torn ACL and MCL is never easy, and he would regress over the next 2 years before he himself is eventually bought out by the Bruins. Still, solid player. Now Matt Bartkowski, in return, has a quiet first 3 years for Boston, only appearing in a combined 20 games over those 3 years in the NHL. Now he has a strong 2013-14 season, appearing in 64 games and recording 18 assists. However, he would regress the next year, and he would walk as a free agent. So, there's that. Now back up to this part. Right wing Alexander Falstrom, he'd played in the AHL for 3 years for Boston before leaving. He was a prospect. They got his rights. Nothing came of it. Now that 2011 second round pick would become the 40th pick, and with that pick, Boston would select center Alexander Kokochov. And Kokochov himself, he bounces between the NHL and the AHL for 4 years, mostly in the AHL, only appearing in 9 NHL games before he would walk, returning to, guess what, Russia. So, lastly, we have the original trade here, and Boston did get left wing Marco Strom from the Sharks originally, and he has a strong first half season in Boston. And he ends up having a solid first year in Boston as well in the 06-07 campaign. He has a strong year in 2007-2008. Now the following 2008-2009 season was a wash as he dealt with numerous injuries, including a concussion and an ACL injury. Now he has a solid 2009-2010 season. However, he would tear his ACL very early on in the playoffs that year, which obviously hurt him, and he ends up getting traded. Now he gets traded for, quote, future considerations to the LA Kings. So I could not find anything for the life of me on what these future considerations were, so I'm going to say it was essentially the polite way of saying, we're trading you for nothing. So that's what the Bruins and the Sharks got. How did the rest of the teams do? We will start with the Calgary Flames. So the Calgary Flames got a pair of solid players with a center Wayne Premier's, who, unfortunately for them, would only play a minimum role over 2.5 years before he himself was dealt away. We're not going to discuss that. Brad Stewart, the defenseman, he would record 5 assists over 27 games for the Calgary Flames before walking. He had a decent showing in the playoffs that year, but nothing crazy. Next, we have the Minnesota Wild, who got right wing Chuck Kobasu. And Kobasu was an okay player for 1.5 years before he himself left Minnesota. Next, we have the Florida Panthers. And the Panthers got 3 interesting players here. So right wing Craig Weller was the guy that they got that we're following, and he only spent a half year in the AHL before leaving the team. Right wing Byron Bitts was another interesting player. He was a bit of an enforcer. Now, he would only appear in 7 games for the Panthers over 1.5 years, but he had multiple injuries, including a sports hernia, and he ends up walking. He was a big disappointment for Florida. And then we have that 2010 second-round pick that they acquired from Boston. That would become the 36th pick. With that pick, they would select defenseman Alex Petrovic. And Petrovic, he has a minimal impact over his first 3 years on the team, and then he ends up breaking into the lineup in the 2015-2016 campaign, having a decent year. Now, he would regress offensively over the next 2 seasons, but he started to play more physical, more defensively, and he has a horrible 2018-2019 campaign before being traded away. Lastly, we have the LA Kings, who got left wing Marco Sturm, and Sturm had a decent showing over 17 games, but was surprisingly waived by the team. So that is the Joe Thornton trade in its entirety. Obviously, Boston probably regrets trading Joe Thornton, but to put it in the words of the GM at that time, you know what? I'm happy that we got a ring before Joe Thornton's and his new team did. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Have a good rest of your day.